Today we have here Keith Berns, the CEO of the Green Cover Seed Company, one of the major cover crops companies in the United States. And he will chat with us about he will give some tips about cover crops. As always, he's a big time expert on that. And also he will speak with us about his company and the U.S. corn crop and soybean crop. This is Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Keith, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so I would like you to speak about some cover crop concepts and one concept that is really funny that is called the lazy man's garden. Can you please explain us about that?
Sure. So basically, what the concept is, it's been termed a few things. Lazy man garden is one of them. It's been called the chaos garden. We like to refer to it as a milpa garden, and MILPA, milpa, is a Mesoamerican term. So the Native Americans that would have been here in North America, many years ago, they would have done similar things where they took all these different vegetables and corn and all these different things and just planted them together in one plot and let them all grow together in kind of this big diverse harmony. And they referred to that as a milpa. And I actually learned about that term when I read the book 1491 by Charles Mann, because he was talking about that concept and other things. And I said, that's exactly what we want to do. And so what we did was we took kind of our basic warm season cover crop mix, that maybe had 15 or 20 different species in it, some clovers, some grasses, legumes, etc. And then we added squash and cucumbers and pumpkins and melons and okra and beets and green beans and any of the different kinds of vegetables that we could find. We bought and we added it to that mix. So now the Milpa Garden mix has about 50 to 55 different things in it. And the concept is that you take a bag of this, you put it in your grain drill, and you just go out and you plant it in a field. And generally, we encourage people to do this on a small an acre or something. But what we've been doing is we've been giving away that seed for free to farmers who are willing to plant it and harvest it and then donate it to community groups, whether it be a food bank or a homeless shelter or just different things like that, places where that food can go to people who really need it. And so it's really been kind of a cool program. We call it a lazy man's garden because gardening is hard work. And if you can grow all these things together and have them work together instead of trying to do everything in an individual row, it can be quite fun and quite effective. We've had mixed success. Some people have had very good luck with it, had excellent harvests and produce and just more squash and melons and pumpkins and cucumbers and stuff than what they can harvest. In others, if you don't get the timing quite right, the weeds can come in and really kind of mess you up. You can tend, because once you plant it, there's no herbicides or anything you can use because of all that diversity. So we're learning, but people that are doing it are having a lot of fun. It's reconnecting those farmers, those producers. It's reconnecting them with the feeling of actually growing something that another person is going to eat. Because most of us as farmers, especially corn and soybean farmers here in the U.S., most of us don't grow stuff that people eat directly. I grow corn, it goes to a feedlot, somebody's going to eat that steer. That will get eaten indirectly, but with this milpa concept, if I'm donating this food, it's going to someone who's consuming it directly. And there's that changes your mindset. It changes your perspective as a farmer. and even though it's on a very small scale, it's still neat to kind of reconnect with that.
Do you have a lot of customers that apply the concept?
We did. This year we pretty much doubled the amount that we had from last year. We had made up enough for about 600 acres, and we sold out very fast. We probably could have sold enough, or had enough seeds. Some of it we sold to people, some of it we gave away, again, if they were willing to establish that relationship with the food bank. So we did about 600 acres, could have done probably close to 1,000. There was a lot of people calling and asking about it after we were completely out of seed. So for next year, we're going to have to gear up and find more. The difficult thing is finding all that vegetable seed at a reasonable enough price to where you can still afford to do it.
One of the pushers of cover crops in the US is Jason Malk, and I heard from him that he considers a waste having so much space between rows. Do you agree with him?
Well, I can tell you better after next week. I'm actually going to Jason's field day. He's got a field day next Friday, I believe, out in Indiana. So I've got some other meetings along the way, but I thought, oh, this will work out great. So I'm going to be at Jason's place at his field day. I'm going to see that. There's been a lot of people experimenting with the 60-inch, wide row spacing corn. Having some pretty good luck, some pretty good success. I think overall, I heard the figure that right now of all the trials that this one person had looked at, there was about a 5% yield loss or yield drag by doing that system. But that same individual said, I think we can overcome that. I think we can get back to where we don't lose any yield and then still have all of that biomass, all that cover crop growing because of those wider rows. Because, as anybody that's ever tried interseeding anything into corn can tell you, the number one limiting factor in that is sunlight. And the reason your cover crop doesn't grow very well is it just is not getting enough sunlight. And that's what the wide row spacing does. It gets the sunlight down to those companion crops or those cover crops. And so, theoretically, you could probably do that with some of this Milpa garden concept. Then you'd have to go out in your cornfield to harvest your cucumbers and squash, but it could be done.
Yeah, do you see a growth in the use of cover crops in the US, and is there an enhancement in the use of cover crops?
Well, yeah, it's growing. It's slow. We figure that there's probably somewhere, 20 to 25 million acres of cover crops in the United States, which, sounds like a big number, but that's probably still only, somewhere between 4 and 7% of the acres that are actually getting cover crop. Those are the numbers that I hear, and that's probably true. But probably started out at 1%, 2%. So it's coming. There's more interest, I believe, all the time with soil health. Soil health is what needs to be pushed. Cover crops are probably the tool that most people are missing. That is the easiest thing to implement for them. And cover crops, really, if you look at the principles of soil health, cover crops really fit all 5 of them. They help keep the soil covered. They help a living root growing there all the time. They help maximize your diversity. They're going to help having that living root, and they help with the livestock integration as well. So cover crops are not the only tool, but they're absolutely the best tool to getting your soil to a healthier state where you'd want it to be.
I will ask you a little bit of a general question, but in your opinion, what's soil health?
Well, I think soil health is the NRCS definition here of soil health is a continued capacity for the soil to provide and support ecosystems that will support humans and livestock. And I think that's very true. In my opinion, soil health is the ability of that soil to function as it was created to function. And it has to take into consideration the chemical parts. And when I say chemical, the nutrients, The physical part, soil structure, infiltration, all that is very important. But the biological part is what is most overlooked in soil health. And so I think that most of us, when we think about soil health, we think about biology because biology is living, and that's the living part of the soil. And really, if you think about the term soil health, you don't use the word health to describe something that's not supposed to be alive. You don't talk about the health of a rock. You talk about health with a system or a person, an organism that is supposed to be alive. So by definition, the soil is alive. It just matters how healthy is it. And so I like that phrase a lot because it reminds us that it is a living ecosystem. The mineral parts of the soil itself is not alive. So to get soil health, you have to get that biological component into that whole ecosystem in order to make the system alive.
What are the most important tools, in your opinion, to have soil health?
Well, the most important tools, again, if you go back to the principles of soil health, from what I have seen here on our own farm here in Nebraska and on many other people's farms, keeping the soil covered. You just have to keep it covered, because if it's always bare and it's exposed, we've just seen far too much of it washed away, blow away, get extremely hot when it's bare and uncovered. So one of the best tools is just simply keeping things covered up, keeping that sunlight off of it, keeping the wind off of it, breaking the impact of that raindrop. So I think that's the critical step, is keeping it covered up. And then once it's covered up, now you can start to build it. Now it's protected. And so the second thing that I believe, after you can kind of keep it covered and protected, is to keep something growing in there all the time, a plant root, having living growing roots all the time, and preferably, more than one type. And again, that's where cover crops, since we started our company, we've always been a very big proponent of the diverse mixes, 6, 8, 10, 12 different things in a mix, because all those different roots and all those different plants growing together are going to be far better for the soil and for the biology than just one thing. So keep it covered up, keep something growing in there all the time. And then number 3, just have as much diversity as possible. And I think if you can do that, you'll really see your soil build pretty quickly.
I would like to hear from you because you are, I assume you are a lot on the field, very often on the field. So what are you hearing about this season's corn and soybean crops? Are you seeing a good crop, as the USDA is saying?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly, the crop got planted in far better conditions this year than the last couple of years. Most of the crops, I think, got in fairly good timing. Last year, things were delayed a lot, and there were a lot of prevented planted. I heard 18 to 20 million acres last year never got planted, just with all of the wet weather. This year, I think that number is probably only going to be 2 or 3 million acres. So there's a lot more that got planted, and it got planted fairly timely. So far, I think the crop is shaping up to be pretty good. Now, we're kind of in the central part of Nebraska, and from us and west, it's starting to get pretty dry. And so we're starting to get a little concerned about that. I think to the east, they still have good moistures. They've gotten better rains. So we're a little concerned on our dryland crops here that, we've had a couple rain chances that didn't happen. And so there's certainly the chance of having some drier weather in areas that are going to hurt. Those areas probably aren't the heart of the Corn Belt, but it's certainly still going to take the top end out of that.
Okay, and I would like to hear about your company. When did you start that? What exactly do you sell? For our viewers, I will talk a lot about cover crops, no tillage. So I guess you are going to be a very frequent guest here. So tell us
Sure.
a little bit about your company.
Yeah, so our company, Green Cover Seed, we started in 2009, but actually the story starts before that. My brother Brian and I have been farming here in Nebraska really all of our lives. It's where we grew up. I went away and taught school for 10 years and then came back. And in 2005, we actually heard Ademir Caligari from Brazil came to the United States, came to the No-Till on the Plains conference, and was talking about this crazy concept, these cocktail mixes, these diverse cover crop mixes. We'd never really heard about that before, never thought about it or considered it. And so from that talk, from when Ademir came and talked, Gabe Brown and Jay Fuhrer and some of those guys up in North Dakota, they took the concept back to North Dakota. They tried it, had some good successes. So we talked about that concept ever since that meeting, and it was 2005 or 2006. I can't remember what year. We talked about it for a couple of years and didn't get anything tried on our farm. And then in 2008, I applied for a small grant through the Sustainable Ag Research and Education, the SARE program here in the United States. And we got, it was like $5,000 or $6,000 we got. And what we did is we bought moisture sensors, because the concern is that if we plant this cover crop, it's going to take all of our moisture and that's going to rob it from the next crop. And if we get dry, then that's going to hurt. And so we wanted to experiment with these cover crops and just see how much moisture they were actually taking. So in 2008, we did that. We planted about 30 different types of cover crops and monoculture strips. And then I combined those into 4 or 5 different mixtures of all those different things as well. And we planted it in July after wheat harvest. And then we put these moisture sensors in and we monitored it throughout the summer and even into the fall. And what we learned several things. Number one, we learned that the mixes were actually using moisture much more efficiently than any of the monocultures did. Still don't quite understand that, but that's what those sensors were saying. And we've seen that proven out in field studies time and time again, that the mixtures were just simply more efficient at using water than the monoculture strips did. Number two, we left a strip where it was not bare ground because there was good heavy wheat stubble there. But even that strip of wheat stubble where nothing was growing, that lost a significant amount of water also. And so, what we thought maybe would be a zero use water situation where nothing was growing, it still lost water, still lost moisture. And so that was interesting to us. Number three, we saw how well the cattle did when we grazed them on this, because we planted we just had these plots in little strips. And so we planted the rest of the field to the mix, and the cattle did exceptionally well on it. And then number four, we discovered it was really hard to find a lot of these seeds, because we had to look at a lot of different places to find the 30 different types of cover crop seeds we wanted to use. And so based on all that, we decided to start Green Cover Seed. We started in 2009. We just kind of took some orders for ourselves and from some friends, and I went to another guy's place and got all the seed. And we moved enough seed for about 1,000 acres. And that was in 2009. So this year, 2020, 11 years later, we'll ship enough seed out the door this year to cover something over 1 million acres this year. So it went from about 1,000 acres to 1 million acres in 11 years. Now there's a lot of learning, a lot of building, a lot of hiring people, a lot of investments along the way. But we continue to see the same things. We see the mixes do the best. We see the cattle do exceptionally well, and we think that's kind of where our niche is in doing these mixes. We now have probably 120 or 130 different types of seed, and we specialize in custom mixing that for our customers in any combination that they want. So we don't have, we have a few pre-made mixes, but we don't really encourage that. We have that for, like if a small acreage gardener or something wants an acre or something, we can just grab that. But the vast majority of what we send out the door, we put in these diverse customized mixes based on what we think is going to be best for that individual's field. And we've got an online tool on our website, greencoverseed.com. We have a tool called the Smart Mix Calculator, and it allows people to go in there and build their own mixes. And as they build their mixes, they can see not only do they see what it's going to cost them, but they can see we've got it so it gives different scores. How good is it for nitrogen fixation? How good is it for grazing? How good is it for winter tolerance? How good is it for salinity? And so as you add different things to the mix, all those different scores change and you can kind of see if you're meeting the goals that you selected. So it's a pretty complex and sophisticated tool, but it really helps people through the concepts.
I guess the challenges have been changing over these years. Can you tell us what the questions of the farmers have been done over these years?
Well, in the beginning, I think a lot of people were like us. They were skeptical, thinking it was going to take too much moisture. I think that the people that have tried it and used it and seen it and are really watching, they no longer really ask that question. So there's kind of two groups of people, I guess I should say. The people that are kind of the innovators, the ones that aren't afraid to get out there and try things, they're no longer asking, will this work? They're asking, how do I make this work the best? And so they're constantly experimenting. They're constantly trying different things, different timings. Jason Mock and the 60-inch corn is a great example. How he's not asking, will it work? He knows that it will work. He's asking, how do I make it work, or how do I make it work better? So you've got that group of people, and then there's a group of farmers, that probably are still asking that question: is this going to work for me? And so those are the ones you have to work a little harder at to convince. And then there's probably a third group of people out there that probably are saying, I don't care if it works, I'm not going to do it. because that doesn't fit the way I farm. It doesn't fit my philosophy. I don't want to make those investments.
And it's a lot of work, I guess.
Yeah, well, it is. It takes extra management. I know that you interviewed Steve Groff recently. Steve's a good friend of mine.
Yes.
I love one of the sayings that Steve has, and I use this all the time, and I give him credit for it. But he says cover crops will make a good farmer better and a bad farmer worse. Because if you don't manage it right, it can hurt you, and it will make you a worse farmer. But if you apply the management, it's not going to work every time. It's not going to work every year, but overall, the successes are going to outweigh the failures, and your soil will grow. And then once it starts growing, it's kind of a cumulative effect, compounding and cascading effects. And so some of the benefits you don't even start seeing until year 2 or year 3 or year 4. But if you hang with it, then you really start to see those benefits kick in, and you really start seeing increased productivity with reduced inputs once your soil is largely alive and biological.
Final question: how does COVID-19 has affected your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. COVID-19, we're very thankful. We're very blessed. We have not had any direct effects of, our people getting sick. We have not had to really shut down. We've had to do, extra precautions like everybody's doing, additional cleaning, some restrictions on who can come in and to the building and things like that. The biggest effect certainly is just in the downturn of the ag economy, well, the economy in general, but the ag economy. Cattle prices really dropped, corn prices really dropped, everything dropped. The whole economic collapse, and that is definitely hurting. The guys that want to do cover crops, they have to either try to do it a little cheaper, or they have to really give it more consideration. There's no doubt that we've lost some sales to that. But on the other hand, it may have gained us some sales, because people with livestock, people with cattle, they're taking some of their least productive ground, some of that ground that they don't grow very good crops on anyway. They're taking it out of corn and soybean production and growing the forages on it for their cattle, for their livestock. So not only are they producing some cheaper feed for their cattle, they're also building the health of that soil along the way. And not everybody's doing that, and nobody's doing that on all their acres, but it is a good way of building soil in a time when, if it's not going to be profitable growing $4 corn, it darn sure isn't going to be profitable growing $2.60 corn. So some of that, has come out that way. But I think the big thing with us is just going to be, the downturn in the whole ag economy, which is a reflection of the economy overall. And we may not have seen those effects yet. Those may still be coming as the wave of this economic downturn sometimes comes a little later. So I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, I really have to thank Keith. because he is having a really full agenda, a really full schedule, and he is receiving me on Saturday. So thank you, Keith, for your time and being on my show.
You're welcome. Thank you.